Welcome to Outbreak Brief, the podcast that takes you inside the world's most dangerous infections.
Glad to be here for another deep dive.
So today we're tracking a pathogen that is, it's the absolute definition of a stealthy, lifelong occupant. We're talking about Human Cytomegalovirus, or CMV.
Right, CMV, it's an incredible pathogen.
It really is. It's this masterful biological escape artist. And I want to speak directly to you listening to this right now. There is a very, very high probability that this virus is actively hiding inside your cells at this exact moment.
Yeah, that's the unsettling part.
Most people will never even notice it's there,
Yeah.
Yet behind that silent facade, it remains the leading infectious cause of congenital birth defects worldwide. Today, you are about to meet a virus that has practically rewritten the rules of how to invade, hide, and survive inside the human body.
It's an incredibly sobering reality because we aren't dealing with a simple brute force pathogen here. We're looking at a highly evolved, ancient biological machine.
I want to set the scene for this. Imagine a burglar who breaks into your home. But instead of, stealing your valuables and running out into the night, this burglar meticulously rewires your entire security system.
They just disable the whole thing.
Exactly. They disable the cameras, they silence the alarms, and then they simply move into your basement. Forever.
Yeah, they just set up camp.
And they just live there, perfectly quiet. By age 5, nearly 1 in 3 children in the U.S. has this burglar living in their basement.
Which is a staggering statistic when you think about it.
Right. And by age 40, over half of all adults have it. Once CMV gets inside you, it never, ever leaves.
The sheer scale of its success is, it's terrifying. I mean, if you have a healthy immune system, your body acts like a vigilant homeowner. It constantly keeps that burglar locked in the basement.
So you don't feel sick at all?
Exactly. You don't show symptoms. The virus is trapped, but it's always waiting. The devastating threat arises when the virus encounters a highly specific, vulnerable group.
People who can't keep the basement door locked.
Yes, those whose immune systems are compromised and, crucially, developing babies in the womb where the body's security system hasn't even been fully built yet.
Okay, let's unpack this. Anatomically speaking, what are we dealing with here? I know CMV is a DNA virus belonging to the beta herpesvirus subfamily.
That's right, it's a beta herpesvirus.
But what really stands out in all the research we pulled for this deep dive is its sheer size and complexity.
Oh.
I mean, if you think of a typical virus like the common cold as a small specialized strike team, CMV seems entirely different.
Oh, totally different.
It brings a massive, fully equipped invading army. It has the largest genome of any known human DNA virus. The sources say it's 235 to 250 kilobases. But let's ground that. What does a kilobase actually mean in terms of scale? How is this virus built?
Think of a kilobase as a dense page in a biological instruction manual. So the virus that causes COVID-19, for example, has an instruction manual of about 30 pages.
Okay, 30 pages.
CMV's manual is up to 250 pages long. Yeah, it encodes over 170 different proteins. And structurally, it's built like a fortress. At the center, you have the nucleocapsid, which is basically a reinforced vault holding that massive DNA manual.
Right.
Surrounding the vault is a layer called the tegument.
So what does the tegument do? Is it just padding for the vault?
Not at all. The tegument is essentially a toolkit. It's packed with viral proteins that are pre-made and ready to go. The second the virus breaches a human cell, it dumps this toolkit into the cell to immediately hijack the host's machinery.
Before it even opens the vault?
Exactly, before the DNA vault even opens. And finally, surrounding all of that is a lipid envelope, which is a stolen disguise made out of the host's own cellular membrane.
That's insidious.
It is. And that envelope is completely studded with specialized viral keys called glycoproteins.
So it's heavily armed from the inside out. But why does it need an instruction manual that is nearly 10 times larger than a typical respiratory virus?
Well, that's where its strategy is so different. Most viruses dedicate the vast majority of their genetic code purely to copying themselves as fast as possible.
Right, they just want to multiply and get out.
Exactly. But CMV dedicates over 70% of its massive genetic code to things that are technically not essential for basic replication.
70%.
Yeah, it uses that 70% for highly sophisticated immune evasion and cellular tropism.
Tropism meaning its ability to adapt to and infect a massive variety of different human cells.
You got it. It doesn't just want to multiply quickly. It wants to establish permanent control over the host's environment.
Because of that intense genetic complexity, humanity has essentially been locked in an invisible arms race with this virus for millennia. I mean, we've spent over 50 years throwing intense modern research efforts at CMV, and we still have failed to produce a licensed vaccine.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to view this through an evolutionary lens. This isn't a novel outbreak that recently jumped from animals to humans.
Right, it's an ancient war.
Yes, CMV has evolved alongside the human immune system for thousands of years. For almost every countermeasure our immune system has developed, CMV has evolved a specific, tailored viral protein to neutralize it. It survives by seamlessly coexisting with our biology.
Which brings up a critical question. How does an invader that is so massive and so complex manage to spread so easily that, like, over half the adult population currently has it?
It uses our most basic human interactions.
Yeah, it spreads through body fluids, right? Saliva, urine, blood, tears, semen, and breast milk. And a major vector here, children.
Children are huge spreaders of this.
Toddlers can shed the virus in their saliva and urine for months after they get infected.
It is incredibly persistent in the environment of a daycare or a household. I mean, it spreads via direct contact, through sexual contact, through organ transplants, and critically, it can cross the placenta during pregnancy.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's zoom in on how it actually enters a cell, because the research on its entry mechanism is just wild.
It's fascinating biology.
It doesn't just have one way to break in. Because of all those proteins it carries, CMV acts like a master burglar carrying a giant keyring. It uses entirely different keys depending on which cellular door it wants to open.
Exactly. And the chemical keys it uses are those glycoproteins we mentioned earlier on its outer envelope. Let's say CMV wants to infect a fibroblast.
Which is the type of connective tissue cell, right?
Right. It provides the structural framework in your body. To get inside, the virus uses a three-part key called the trimer. This trimer acts as the key for the back door. It binds perfectly to a specific receptor on the surface of the fibroblast.
The PDGFR alpha receptor, right?
Yes, exactly. And that binding triggers the membranes to fuse, and the virus just slips its vault right inside.
But fibroblasts aren't the only cells it targets. It also wants to infect epithelial cells, which line the surfaces of your organs, and endothelial cells inside your blood vessels.
And the backdoor key won't work for those. Those cells have totally different locks. So CMV pulls out a master key for the front gate.
This is the pentamer.
Yes, the pentamer. It's a massive complex structure made of 5 unique viral proteins. This pentamer is specifically engineered to bind with receptors found highly concentrated on the lining of your organs and blood vessels.
And what happens when it unlocks them?
When the pentamer unlocks these receptors, the human cell's membrane actually folds inward and literally swallows the virus whole, pulling it deep inside in a bubble.
It's staggering. It carries multiple lockpicks just in case it encounters different types of cells. So since the virus has the keys to almost any cell in the human body, who suffers the most when it finally gets inside? We mentioned earlier that a healthy adult immune system generally keeps it locked in the basement.
Yeah, for a healthy adult, the initial infection is often completely silent. You might feel a mild fever, sore throat, some fatigue, or maybe swollen glands.
Nothing crazy.
No, occasionally it can cause mononucleosis or mild hepatitis, but usually it passes unnoticed. The catastrophic damage falls almost entirely on 2 specific groups. First, the immunocompromised.
Like organ transplant recipients and HIV/AIDS patients.
Exactly. Without a strong immune defense to keep the virus suppressed, CMV reactivates from its latent state and goes on a rampage. It causes severe life-threatening damage. It attacks the retina, leading to blindness, and aggressively targets the lungs, the liver, and the gastrointestinal tract.
And the second group, which makes this virus such a hidden tragedy, are developing babies. If a pregnant woman is infected with CMV for the first time during her pregnancy, or if an old infection reactivates.
Which happens because her immune system is fluctuating.
Right. The virus can cross the placenta. This is congenital CMV, and the statistics are heavy. About 1 in 200 babies is born with congenital CMV, and of those, about 1 in 5 will suffer severe birth defects or long-term health problems.
It is a profound tragedy, primarily because it is a silent maternal infection. The mother often has absolutely no idea she's even sick, yet the virus is causing permanent developmental abnormalities in the child. We see brain damage, severe liver and spleen enlargement, and lung problems right at birth.
But the most common long-term defect is hearing loss, right? And what's particularly insidious is that this hearing loss isn't always present at birth. It can develop months or even years later during childhood.
Yeah, long after the initial infection. That is what makes newborn screening so difficult. A child might pass their initial hearing test, but the virus is still slowly causing neurological damage in the inner ear as they grow.
So with such severe life-altering consequences for these vulnerable groups, how do doctors fight back once the burglar is out of the basement and actively destroying the house?
Well, there are treatments.
The sources mention traditional antivirals like ganciclover and something called an oral prodrug, valganciclover. I want to clarify prodrug real quick. That's basically an inactive medicine you take, and it only becomes an active weapon once your body's own metabolism breaks it down,
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly.
Like swallowing a locked briefcase that your liver has to open.
That's a great way to visualize it. Valganciclover is actually used specifically to try and improve hearing and developmental outcomes in babies born with congenital CMV.
Wait, hold on. I want to push back on this treatment strategy for a second because something in the mechanism doesn't add up. We established earlier that CMV is a DNA virus.
Right.
The sources say these traditional drugs work by interfering with viral DNA replication. They essentially jam the virus's machinery so it can't copy its genetic code.
Yeah.
But if you're flooding the body with a drug that aggressively stops DNA from replicating, aren't we basically dropping a bomb on the patient's entire body?
Yes. That's the problem.
Human cells need to divide and copy DNA too, especially in a rapidly growing newborn or a healing transplant patient.
You've zeroed in on the exact fundamental limitation of these legacy antivirals. That mechanism is exactly why drugs like ganciclover cause severe, dangerous toxicity. Because they inhibit DNA synthesis broadly, they often cause extreme bone marrow suppression.
Meaning the patient's bone marrow stops producing enough white and red blood cells.
Exactly, which is devastating for someone who is already immunocompromised. Other drugs in this class, like cidofovir, cause severe kidney damage. We are essentially carpet bombing the cellular replication process just to hit the virus.
Which means we desperately need smarter, more targeted weapons. We need a sniper rifle, not a carpet bomb.
And that necessity has driven the development of newer, highly specific inhibitors. For example, a newer drug called letermovir targets what's called the viral terminase complex.
What's that?
It's a specific piece of viral machinery that acts like a packaging motor, stuffing the newly copied viral DNA into its vault. Human cells don't have a terminase complex.
Oh, I see.
Because the drug targets a machine that only the virus uses, it is far less toxic to the patient.
Okay, so treating it after the fact is difficult, highly toxic, and complicated. That usually means public health turns to its ultimate weapon, a vaccine. But as we discussed, we don't have one. After 50 years of clinical trials, why is CMV so incredibly hard to vaccinate against?
It comes back to that 250-page instruction manual and those immune evasion strategies. To make a successful vaccine, you need to introduce the host's immune system to the virus's appearance so the body can build antibodies.
Prime its defenses.
Exactly. But CMV is a master of sabotage. It literally attacks our immune system's communication networks from the inside out.
Let's break down how it actually does that. The sources talk about something called the CGAS sting pathway. Usually we just hear that called the cell's internal alarm system. But what is the actual chemical tripwire here?
Okay, so human cells have specific enzymes that act like motion detectors in a high-security museum. Normally, DNA is securely locked away inside the nucleus of a cell.
Right.
If these enzymes detect free-floating DNA out in the main body of the cell, the cytoplasm, they know an invader is present. That detection trips a chemical wire, triggering the cell to pump out interferons.
And interferons are distress signals, right? They warn neighboring cells to raise their shields.
Yes, and they summon the immune system. But CMV doesn't let that distress signal go out.
How does it stop it?
It deploys specific proteins from its massive toolkit that physically bind to those human motion detector enzymes and disable them. It literally snips the chemical tripwire so the alarm never sounds, even as the virus unpacks its DNA.
But it goes deeper than that. Snipping the alarm wire is one thing, but the immune system still sends security guards on patrol, right? I mean, it doesn't just rely on the alarm.
True. Normally, when a cell is infected, it takes tiny pieces of the virus and displays them on its outer surface using a molecular display case called MHCI.
MHCI.
Yes. It's like the cell is holding up a barcode that says, "I am infected, destroy me." Roaming T cells scan these barcodes, recognize the viral threat, and kill the infected cell.
So what does the virus do? It can't hide the barcode forever.
It creates proteins that act like bouncers. They grab those MHCI display cases from inside the cell and literally drag them into the cell's internal trash cans.
The lysosomes.
Exactly. It destroys the barcodes before they ever reach the surface.
So the T cells scan the outside of the cell, see no infected barcode, and walk right past. Wait, I know the immune system has a backup for this. Natural killer cells.
10K cells, yes.
NK cells don't look for the viral barcode. They look for the absence of the normal, healthy barcode. If a cell is mysteriously missing its display case, the NK cell destroys it just to be safe.
That is the brilliance of the human immune system. But this is where CMV's dark biology truly shines. CMV reads that strategy and counters it.
No way.
Yeah, the virus encodes its own protein that is a perfect structural fake of the human MHCI molecule. It's a forged security badge. The virus places this decoy badge on the surface of the cell.
So when the natural killer cell comes by,
It scans the fake badge, registers the cell as a normal, healthy employee, and leaves it alone. The sabotage is absolute.
it's terrifying. It literally forged a barcode to bypass the secondary security sweep. And this explains the graveyard of failed vaccines. The medical community tried a live attenuated vaccine, which is a weakened form of the virus. It failed in phase 2 trials because it just couldn't prevent infection.
Right, the V160 vaccine.
And they tried injecting massive DNA vaccines, and those completely missed their targets in phase 3 trials. So where does that leave us? Is there any hope on the horizon for a vaccine?
The current hope rests on the same technology that changed the landscape of the COVID-19 pandemic, mRNA. Moderna currently has an mRNA vaccine candidate in phase 3 clinical trials right now.
Oh, wow.
Instead of relying on a weakened whole virus, this vaccine uses multiple specific mRNA sequences to teach the body to recognize the exact keys CMV uses to enter cells.
Specifically, it teaches the immune system to recognize that massive 5-part master key we talked about, the pentamer.
Correct. By training the body to mass-produce antibodies against the pentamer, the goal is to physically gum up the virus's master key, locking it out of the cells entirely before it can ever get inside to snip the alarm wires or forge the security badges.
But until that mRNA vaccine completes its trials, gets approved, and reaches the public, we have to rely on behavioral prevention to shield the vulnerable. If you are pregnant, how do you protect yourself from a virus that is carried by half the adult population and completely invisible?
Since we know toddlers are the major vectors, shedding the virus in their saliva and urine for months, prevention requires strict hygiene. But the guidelines often run counter to a mother's natural instincts.
What do you mean?
Well, if you are pregnant, the primary prevention method is simply not sharing fluids with young children.
Let's be specific about what that means in daily life. That means not sharing a spoon when eating applesauce, not sharing cups. Avoid kissing young children directly on the lips or cheeks where saliva is present.
Exactly.
And definitely not taking a toddler's dropped pacifier, popping it in your own mouth to clean it, and handing it back.
It sounds incredibly mundane, but these deeply ingrained, loving actions are the primary ways the virus transfers. That and the necessity of rigorous hand washing with soap and water after every single diaper change, or after helping a child use the toilet.
We also have to talk about early detection. If a baby is born with congenital CMV, finding out early is critical so doctors can intervene with treatments like valganciclovir to try and preserve their hearing. But the testing has a very strict window.
It does. A standard blood test is actually not the best way to detect this in a newborn. It requires a saliva or urine test. And critically, that test must be administered within the first 2 to 3 weeks of life.
Why so fast?
If you wait beyond 3 weeks and the baby tests positive, doctors can't definitively say if the baby was born with it or if they caught it from a family member after birth.
Which is why public awareness is so absolutely crucial. June is National CMV Awareness Month, recognized by public health agencies to help educate parents and providers. Because despite being the leading infectious cause of birth defects, a shocking number of people have never even heard of it until it affects their family.
And that lack of awareness is CMV's greatest ally.
Let's pull back and look at the broader picture. If 70 to 90% of the globe already have this virus, shielding everyone seems almost impossible. Once the virus establishes that permanent residency in the body, how exactly does it just stay there for decades?
Right.
How does the immune system not eventually find it and clean it up over a lifespan of 80 years?
What's fascinating here is how it achieves this by hiding in highly specific privileged locations. It primarily retreats into what are called CD34 positive hematopoietic progenitor cells.
Simply put, these are the vital stem cells deep inside your bone marrow that generate your blood.
Exactly. It also hides in monocytes, which are a type of white blood cell patrolling your bloodstream. During this latency period, the virus essentially goes dark. It shuts down almost all of its gene expression, so it remains invisible to immune patrols.
But I'm reading here in the sources that it isn't entirely passive.
Yeah.
Even while it's sleeping, It's actively maintaining its own safe room.
That's one of the most incredible discoveries. Even while latent, CMV is actively manipulating the microenvironment around it. The virus forces the host's bone marrow cells to increase the production of a specific human protein called TGF-beta.
And TGF-beta naturally suppresses the immune system, right?
Yes. By forcing the human body to turn up the production of this immunosuppressant locally, the virus creates a microscopic, chemically shielded safe zone around itself inside the bone marrow.
That's wild.
It ensures its permanent survival, setting the stage to wake back up and reactivate whenever the host's overall immunity dips due to age, stress, or illness.
So if you are one of the millions of people who have this, right now as you listen to this virus is actively pumping out chemicals in your bone marrow to keep your immune system quiet.
Yeah, right now.
That brings us to the horizon. What does the future of fighting CMV look like? If legacy antivirals are too toxic and vaccines are struggling against its decoys, what is the next frontier?
Researchers are looking at entirely new paradigms. One approach is host-targeted inhibitors, instead of trying to attack the virus directly.
Which often just leads to the virus mutating and becoming resistant.
Precisely. What if we alter the human cell just enough that the virus can't use it?
Like altering the wiring in the house so the burglar can't use the electricity.
Yes. Drugs like artesunate, which is traditionally an antimalarial, or even certain COX-2 inhibitors, are being studied because they interfere with the cellular pathways that CMV absolutely relies on to multiply. If we deny the virus the host resources it needs, it can't replicate.
And there's also the frontier of cellular therapies like TCR-T cells. This is straight out of science fiction.
Oh, it really is.
TCR-T cell therapy involves extracting a patient's own T cells, taking them into a lab, and genetically engineering them to specifically hunt down the hidden intracellular proteins that CMV uses. Then, doctors infuse this lab-grown, hyper-focused immune army back into the patient to clear the infection.
It's a way of artificially overriding the virus's evasion tactics and giving a vulnerable patient an unstoppable immune response.
So what does this all mean? When we step back and look at CMV, a virus that possesses a massive genetic manual, carries multiple cellular keys, forges immune security badges, and literally embeds itself into our bone marrow stem cells to create a permanent, chemically shielded safe room.
It's an evolutionary marvel.
Is true eradication even a scientific possibility? Or are we ultimately realizing that our coevolution with this ancient pathogen is inescapable? If lifelong management, rather than a cure, is the only way forward, it fundamentally reframes our relationship with viruses. They aren't just temporary invaders, they are permanent architects of our biology. It's a chilling thought to realize that the burglar in the basement might actually hold the deed to the house.
It certainly makes you view the human body differently.
Stay informed. Stay prepared. This has been Outbreak Brief.